All right, folks, we are live here on the Yishai Fleisher Show, and we'll just give it a few minutes for everybody to join in. And we have a great show for you with Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, so stay tuned for that. Can't wait to see you. And of course, you can comment, and I'll be able to see your comments. So join up right now, and let's have a great conversation together. All right, Rabbi Stephen, just another few seconds. People are joining up from all over the world. And I love to play these little cartoons for folks with the beautiful Jewish music. And I'd love to hear from you guys, so everybody give me a thumbs up and post a little comment, and we can get the show going. All right, folks, shalom and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live on the Land of Israel Network and through my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, which is Ion Zine, and Twitter Periscope. And we're already hearing from different people around the world, including Simon, who says, good morning from Johannesburg. And my good friend Lou says, shalom to Yishai and Rabbi Pruzansky, two of my favorite people. Rabbi Lou Weiss from Modi'in is already saying hi. He's a good friend of mine, and obviously a good friend of yours as well. And today we are getting ready for Yom Kippur. We have Shabbat Shuvah, which is the Shabbat of repentance and return. And we're getting ready for Yom Kippur, the great day of awe, which is really all about personal and national repentance. And the Torah links up the idea of repentance to return to your natural state. Maybe you return to the Garden of Eden. Maybe you return to the Garden of Eden. Maybe you return to a perfected state. But part of that returning to the perfected state is returning to the land of Israel. And Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky is an incredible example of the yearning for the land of Israel from the diaspora. And in his bio, he has a very, very long bio. He writes now that he is Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, the Rabbi Emeritus of Congregation Bnei Yeshurun in Teaneck, consisting of over almost 600 families in that beautiful and very Jewish town of Teaneck, New Jersey. But if you've ever been to Bnei Yeshurun, you know that it's something like an embassy of the land of Israel, of the state of Israel. You walk in there, you see a huge picture of the Western Wall, and various other pictures of the land of Israel, soldiers, and all kinds of stuff. Now, in my travels throughout the United States and Canada, I've seen a lot of synagogues. I've seen a few Zionist synagogues, or let me amend that. I've seen a few pro-Israel synagogues, but I've never seen such a Zionist synagogue as Bnei Yeshurun in Teaneck. It was just, you walked in there, you knew already where you were, what this place stood for. However, the reason it says Rabbi Emeritus is that recently he served in that synagogue from 1994, but very recently, and already says that in his bio, he made Aliyah to Modi'in, Israel. I can't talk right now. my 5-year-old, he doesn't always understand that we're broadcasting. In any case, this Aliyah that he's made has been a big deal for people who know Rabbi Pruzansky and have followed his career, which includes being a lawyer. I have the honor of being a graduate of the same law school as him, Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. He practiced as law for 13 years, and he is a member of the New York and federal bars. He was admitted to practice before the United States Supreme Court. He is, of course, a rabbi. He's also a great teacher and has fabulous lectures on YU Torah and other places, also about history. And he's got a blog which is well known to tackle some of the tough issues. One thing about Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky is he doesn't pull any punches. With all that, and you can check out his bigger bio at Rabbi Pruzansky, Pruzansky. The PRU threw me off, so that's the way it's spelled, Pruzansky. With all that, his final step into the land of Israel and becoming emeritus in Teaneck and becoming very much not emeritus here in the land of Israel is what concerns me and has been something a long time in coming. Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yishai, welcome. It's a pleasure to be back with you.
Yes, but now, although we're in the same country and in the same land, we are Zooming it because or we're doing it on StreamYard because the minute you came back to the land of Israel after talking about it and thinking about it for so many years, you have been capsulated, right? You've been encapsulated into this Corona time.
More or less. We came in July and right away entered quarantine of 2 weeks. And then we had a couple of weeks of respite. And then, of course, the last few weeks, as we know, our lives again have been upended. And now we are facing an even more intensified closure. So it takes getting used to, but I will console myself. I try to console others as well that our ancestors who tried to come to the land of Israel face many, many more hardships than having to sit in an air-conditioned apartment and can't go more than a kilometer from their homes. So,
right.
Gam zu yavor, this too will pass, and we'll be able to get out and see the land a little more.
Yeah, a lot of people are actually pretty depressed and upset by this thing. It's really bothering them.
Mm-hmm. I understand why. It's not pleasant, but it's all relative. And again, you can't say imprisoned, but to be restricted in the land of Israel has greater merits than even being able to perambulate in the exile. So it's one way to look at it.
Right. Well, let's talk about that.
Mountains. Yeah.
Let's talk about that because, I've been feeling throughout this last 6 months that I'm like, thank God I'm stuck here. Thank God I'm in the land of Israel. And I feel bad for all of those people who are stuck outside. And I'm not just mimicking my own Zionist, thoughts. I hear that from a lot of people. They for the first time, they've been barred from coming into the land of Israel by some kind of unseen, unknown force. And it has awakened in some people, at least my friends, a tshukah, a yearning for the land of Israel. I wanted to ask you, is that your read of the radar screen of people's emotions?
I've heard this from many people, that there's almost a fear that this restriction will last a long time. People, especially in exile, many in Teaneck as well, became very comfortable just traveling back and forth to the land of Israel, spending the regalim, the Yamim Tovim in Israel. And now for the first time in their lives, they're being told essentially, because you are not citizens of the land of Israel, you cannot come. And they're taken aback by that. Because I think on some level, every Jew in the exile feels a deep connection to the land of Israel, even to an extent, I would say in a generic sense, a citizen. I can't vote, but they're citizens of the land because their destiny is so tied to the land of Israel. And apropos of that, one thing that you mentioned in the introduction about our shul in Teaneck, that when you entered the shul, you felt this connection to the land of Israel. So one thing stuck in my head, it goes back almost 30 years, in my previous shul in Kew Gardens Hills, we were visited once by Rav Shar Yashav Cohen, Zecher Tzadok Livracha, who for many, many decades was the chief rabbi of Haifa. And he stated, according to the Gemara at the end of Megillah, that in the future, all the Batei Knesset and Batei Midrashot in Bavel, meaning the exile, will be uprooted and replanted in the land of Israel. And he said that consequently, if you think of the ramifications of that statement, it means that every shul and every Beit Midrash in the exile right now has an extraterritorial status as part of the land of Israel. In that sense, every shul is an embassy or a consulate of the land of Israel, because the day will come, it'll be lifted up and replanted. So it means it already has that contiguity, that attachment to the land of Israel. It's stuck in my head. And because we're an embassy, or at least we're a consulate of the land of Israel, I thought that it appropriate that when a person walks in to a consulate, to an embassy, to a shul, immediately that person should feel that connection to the land of Israel.
But you do agree, Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, that not all shuls are like that in America, and there's in some ways, it's instead of being an embassy, it's actually an alternative to the land of Israel. It's a place that you could be Jewish, and with the advent of the airplane of El Al flying, I think I calculated, by the way, that there was some 10 or 11 flights from the New York area daily to the land of Israel in regular times, which is on the one hand a beautiful thing. On one hand, it couldn't be better. It's what an amazing gift. We're talking about 400 times 11. We're talking about like 400. We're talking about 4,000 people a day, because these flights are packed coming into the land of Israel. So on the one hand, it's beautiful. On the other hand, there's something about that which lends to people saying, well, I don't really need it. If I want it, it's there for me to fly over. And it's some kind of spiritual playground. I go there for a little bit. I do my thing, but I come back to the real life, to my real home, which is in America. That's what it was like, I think, for a lot of synagogues before Corona, at least. Is that a good read, or am I overdoing it?
I think what you're saying is accurate to a certain extent. There is that feeling extent among many people in America in the exile. I remember Rabbi Riskin, to echo what you were just saying, lamented that many American Jews see Israel as the Jewish Disneyland. They pay a price to get there, they enjoy the rides, and then they go home because you can't live in Disneyland. So that does exist, and I think the recent events, especially the coronavirus and the limitations placed on us, have reminded American Jews, to some extent, not universally, that, yeah, they can be stuck in the exile as some of our ancestors were. And they should be mindful of it. I don't want to sound like I have the unbridled passion of the recent convert. I'm still unpacking, but I'm a lot more sensitive now to certain code words that people use or sing. The song came out, very moving song, but as one of the refrains, it said that we're praying for Mashiach to come, so once again we could live in Israel and return to Yerushalayim. It just came out a few weeks ago, and I think I heard that from perspective of being on this side of the pond now, and thinking to myself, well, Mashiach is not a limitation. You can come now, you can live here, you can live in Yerushalayim, live wherever you want. So you don't need Mashiach to live in the land of Israel. But that idea does seep into the American Jewish psyche, along with other rationalizations as well, and it does tend to diminish their ardor for the land of Israel. But I think that's an undercurrent. For the most part, people feel a deep connection, and they're actually troubled by the fact that when they want to come, they can't come.
Right.
And as long as that idea remains omnipresent in their minds, it's going to give them an increased yearning for the land of Israel that hopefully will result in a change of direction in their lives. I know my last full month in Teaneck in June, as rabbi of the shul, I wrote 8 Jewish status letters for people beginning the process of Aliyah. Usually I was writing 8 in a year, and now I wrote 8 in 1 month, because people are thinking, the world is changing around us. America's not as stable and secure today as it once seemed.
Well, let's hold on that issue for a second. I am a very proud Israeli, but I'm also a proud American. I'm a proud American because I was an immigrant to the United States. My parents were double immigrants. They came from Russia to Israel, from Israel to the United States, and then now back to the land of Israel. And I was always thankful that the United States gave me what it gave me, and I was able to see it kind of from the outside. I was thankful for the freedom of religion. I was thankful for the education. I was thankful for the freedoms, the various freedoms. I'm still thankful for those things, and therefore I'm in a sense a proud American in that I understand that there's this kind of like Roman Empire, if you will, and I'm a member of this empire, and I'm a proud citizen of that empire. Although my personal heart lies in Israel and in building up this country, which is an independent, free Jewish state. But still, I'm thankful that I'm a dual citizen, even though my life is Israel. But I'm thankful for America. But when I look at the America of today, and I'm wary of the fact that I'm looking at it through the lens of the news and all that, I see that very country that I grew up many years in, looking like it's its goodness is dissolving, its shine is kind of coming off of it. There's violence in the streets, more anti-Semitism. Certainly, one can certainly agree to this statement, which is a lot more divisiveness in the society. I've seen that myself, a lot more polarization than I ever remember. So, like, what is that America that I know? Is it still there? I'm asking you as a recent Ole, but somebody who spent a month, his last month in June. Like, is that the same? Is it the same America, or something different about it?
It is different. I don't want to be too dramatic or exaggerate the differences, but America today is unidentifiable to the America in which I was raised and became an adult and, in fact, raised my children. And it's a number of different ways. It's not just the polarization of the politics, which really goes back 20 years. I mean, Bush-Gore, that contentious election, changed the entire dynamic because you had one element of the electorate who felt they were robbed out of the results. And everything changed from there. So Bush had a very contentious term, and it was sort of a reprieve from the perspective of the media in the left when Barack Obama became president. But then when Trump defied all the odds and came as a complete outsider and upended a proud member of the establishment who just felt it was her turn and the turn of a woman, etc., then no holds barred. He doesn't always help. I mean, he could speak in very imprecise and often acrimonious ways. But be that as it may, obviously his actions, from our perspective, are much more effective and successful than his tweets are. It probably is beneath the president to be tweeting so much. But nonetheless, the fact that he was an outsider and people felt it was undeserved and he did not win the popular vote, not that that matters. So you take Bush's presidency and then you escalated almost exponentially the level of discord that the Trump victory presented in 2016. And now, of course, with the explosion of accusations of racism in America and violence in the streets and looting and protests, it's something I don't recognize anymore. And add another critical point. The morality of the country has shifted. A country that was built on a Judeo-Christian ethic that really admired the Bible, recognized a sense of objective morality that came from God, that has the phrase on its currency, "In God we trust." Well, that's a relic of a bygone era, because God and God's morality are not only nowhere to be found anymore in the public domain, but in fact are derided in the public domain. And one who professes those ideas about marriage, for example, about basic norms of morality that guided us from ancient times, one who professes that is considered immoral. So there's been an inversion of morality in America in the last, certainly one generation, maybe a generation and a half. And that's very difficult for Jews to accommodate. So we can lock ourselves in a bubble and say it doesn't affect us and we'll be able to push through it, but there's certain basic norms of Torah life, Torah values that are countercultural now. And if a person expresses them publicly, it could lead to widespread condemnation. I certainly saw that in my writings over the years. Just expressing what the Torah says became something that is perceived as repugnant by many in the general society, and sad to say, many in the secular Jewish society as well. those who more or less are estranged from Torah, or maybe said a different way, they've rewritten the Torah to accommodate their newfound fabricated values.
Right, a new religion, which has a Torah kind of essence, Torah flavor, but it's not really
right.
Torah.
There's a veneer of Torah, and they take
Right.
really some of the phrases from the Nevi'im, from the prophets, but there's really no Torah substance to it. I guess I can mention, because it's very relevant to show the extent of the disconnect that exists. There's circulating now on the internet a YouTube video of the Haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah as broadcast in a Reformed temple by the Rabbi and the cantor, in which they substituted the prophecy of Chana from Shmuel Aleph to some of the writings of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whom they portrayed as a modern-day prophet. Whatever you feel about her, a prophet she was not. A Jewish prophet she was not. But to take that and basically toss aside our heritage and then supplant it with some modern notions, newfangled values that are distant from Torah, and then present it to your congregation as this is what we should be thinking of on Rosh Hashanah, it shows you the depth of the alienation that exists among many Jews towards their true heritage and their destiny.
Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, I just want to take two comments here from people writing, and I think you could see it on your screen. Simon says, I think anti-Semitism has increased hugely around the world. I see it here in South Africa, the increased vandalism of Jewish monuments and synagogues, and my family in the United Kingdom tell me the same is happening there. So people are really feeling the pinch, the anti-Semitic pinch in different places, including places that you, like the UK, which you kind of didn't expect it to raise its ugly head.
It's true to a certain extent. I think it's exaggerated somewhat in an American context, but with this great caveat. Jew hatred, which is what I call it, has always existed in every society, and it's not going to change until Mashiach comes. And it existed in America as well. I think the big change in America is that it's become much more mainstreamed than it was in the past. When I say mainstreamed, I said it used to be ostracism of a person who expressed anti-Semitic or Jew-hating views. But now you have Congress people in America who express it openly, and they're not chastised by their party. There was an amendment to a bill just last week in Congress that made anti-Jewish discrimination part of general anti-discrimination law on the books, and 164 Congress people voted against it. And it's the most anodyne language you can imagine. But 162 Democrats, 1 Republican, and 1 independent voted against it, including 10 Jewish Democrats, who for some reason don't seem to feel that discrimination against Jews should have any protection in the general laws against discrimination. Why is that so? Well, it is becoming countercultural in the Democratic Party to be pro-Jewish, and it's otherwise hard to explain. There is an increase in anti-Jewish sentiment in terms of public statements, violence for sure that's taking place. Rahman al-Islam, it always took place on some level, but the polarization in the society tends to elicit it even more. And I think part of the problem is that when the non-Jewish world, especially the small percent of non-Jews who have grievances against the country and would perpetrate these acts, look at Jews, they don't really know what they're looking at. From one perspective, one group perceives Jews as part of the white ruling establishment, the privileged establishment, and they're discontented with that. Black see Jews as just another group of supremacists or racists. Liberal Jews look at the traditional Jews as being against their desire to shift the cultural and religious norms in society. Americans see Jews as outsiders. Again, not all, not even most, but this group of people with grievances see Jews as outsiders, as that we're not really fully part of the society. If you ever noticed, this always made an impression on me. When American Jews are referred to, they're referred to as American Jews, meaning the Jews, noun, American, adjective, as opposed to other groups, African Americans, German Americans, Hispanic Americans, etc., meaning the noun is the American and the adjective is whatever their origin is. For us, it's always been the opposite. Not that I'm complaining. It's always been the opposite. We're Jews, and we're Jews of a certain type. We happen to live in America. So if you look at it just in terms of the nomenclature, it's going to be a difference between how Jews are perceived. And again, notwithstanding all of that, I think Jews are in a privileged position in the society. We work for it. We earned it. We contribute greatly to the society in numerous ways. And I think that wins us the respect and admiration of most, but the animosity of some. And it's the animosity of the some that eventuates in anti-Jewish violence and rhetoric.
I think what you're saying also, it's counterculture to like Jews, ties back into what you said. It's counterculture to like certain moral values. Those are tied into one another. If you see the Jew, as Hitler said, as a certain consciousness in your society, and so you don't want that consciousness anymore, so you're going to start to dislike Jews because they stand for certain moral values or certain biblical values, and that's just annoying if you want to be freed from those shackles. So you start to kind of throw it off.
Yes, it's true. I would add one more point that always perplexes Americans, non-Jews, the bulk of America, 98% of America. And that is the overwhelming liberal bias of Jews, especially that Jews are wedded to the Democratic Party. I was on the call last week with President Trump, who spoke to American Jewish leaders. I guess I can call myself now an American Jewish leader emeritus. And one of the things that he said, and this was reported even when the call was off the record, off the record meeting with Jews, that means you wait 10 minutes before running to the media instead of 5 minutes.
That's
but
right.
He raised this question. He said, doesn't understand how he's so pro-Israel. No president has ever been as pro-Israel. And yet he said, but you don't vote for me. All right. Now, we do recall, historians will remember, wherever in age we remember this, where none other than James Baker had a different, much more dismissive, even vulgar attitude towards the Jews, whom, as he said, they don't vote for us anyway. What do we owe them? President Trump's not like that. The truth is he owes the Jews very little, because they don't vote for him. And yet he has been very proactive in trying to look after and promote Israel's interests. And it is a puzzle. It has to do, if you ask me, not that you did, but I'll answer anyway, the closer a person is to Jewish heritage and tradition, the more likely they will be to profess.
Rabbi Pruzansky, you got frozen on me. Rabbi Pruzansky, are you there? I lost you there for a second. Let's see if we can get Rabbi Pruzansky back. Rabbi Pruzansky, we need you to return to us again if you don't mind, and we'll get you back in a second. In the meantime, there's this somebody named Marjorie. She says, do the Jews in Israel believe the Gentiles are slaves to them? And she also wrote, does Israel hate the white people? Well, I don't. And then she says to me, I'm still here. She wants an answer. I don't have an answer for you in the sense that these are absurd type of comments like, Israel, does Israel hate white people? No. Do Jews in Israel believe Gentiles are slaves to them? No. So I don't know what you're saying. It's kind of hard for me to answer these kind of questions. Only that I hope that you don't believe that, because that is not even remotely close to the to the truth. But your questions themselves mean something to me in that where would these ideas even come from? Let's see what other questions. David Teman writes, what can be done so that American Jews themselves see how antithetical progressive policies are to the values of Jews and other Americans, and see how helpful the president has been in so many areas? I don't know. It's hard for me to talk about how to get American Jews to think one way or another. I'm always my job is to get them closer to Torah and to the land of Israel. And I guess through that, I've seen in my life that when you start putting on tefillin and eating kosher and keeping Shabbat, then your political opinions change also. Maybe on the metaphysical plane, it's because you become holier. And on the ideological plane, it's because you start to be connected to other values that are more about biblical morality, classic morality, and a human soul, and certainly a Jewish soul, abhors a vacuum. So you could decide when you decide to come closer to God, your soul starts to be filled with other values. Israel becomes much more important. Biblical morality becomes much more important. And so I would say the simplest way to get American Jews to get closer, to understand that the progressive values are damaging to them, is to help them get close to traditional values. And Susan Timmons writes, she says, hi, Rabbi Pruzansky. Now, we don't have him back yet. I'd love to get him back on the line. If we can get him back, that would be great. Let me see if I could get him on the horn here and get him back. I have not seen him yet. Let's see if we can find Rabbi Pruzansky. I'm going to write to him, use the link again, please. Okay. And we'll see if we could get him back. In the meantime, says Susan, hi, Rabbi Pruzansky. We made Aliyah because I've been waiting for Mashiach since I was young. I felt it was closer and I wanted a front row seat. It's been 10 years since we made Aliyah. We want Mashiach now. Welcome home. It's interesting, Susan, that you say that, because to me, I would not say that you're waiting for Mashiach. I would say you're an active member of the yearning to move forward. And so you're not really waiting for Mashiach, you're working for Mashiach. And that's a totally different mindset than waiting for Mashiach. It's a totally different mindset. Much better, in my opinion, is to be an active member of moving the project forward rather than waiting for it to come about. So I see. Writes Marjorie. She writes the reasoning of what she wrote before, because of the direct bloodline to Abraham, as white Europeans do not have. Yes, we have a direct bloodline to Abraham. That's our family. That's our tribe. That does not mean that other tribes don't have value. Other nations, other peoples, all peoples have value, and that's one of the intrinsic lessons of Abraham. One of the intrinsic lessons of Abraham is that people have value. One of the greatest ideas of the Bible is that there's liberation from slavery, and not to allow huge powers to control people, and to not allow people to have freedoms, to be slaves. That's exactly the opposite of the Jewish idea. I see we have Rabbi Pruzansky back. There he is.
Back. Yeah, for some reason my entire internet system cut off.
That happens. And we are connected virtually, and sometimes other forces try to cut us off. But by the way, Rabbi Pruzansky, the Baal Shem Tov said 250 years ago, he said, "You are where your mind is." And I think today that is truer than ever before. You are where your mind is, and what you're you are with me right now. We're together on a broadcast, even though we're physically separated. Rabbi Pruzansky, I wanted to read to you somebody said to you directly something, but I already commented on it. But just quickly, Susan says, "Hi, Rabbi Pruzansky. We made Aliyah because I've been waiting for Mashiach since I was young. I felt it was closer, and I wanted a front row seat. It's been 10 years since we made Aliyah. We want Mashiach now. Welcome home." my comment to Susan is that she's not waiting for Mashiach. She's trying to be an active member of a pro Mashiach movement, right? It's not just waiting around for it, but it's actually doing stuff. So I wanted you to see that people are
yeah, that's correct. There's no doubt that building the infrastructure for Mashiach is at the very heart of the enterprise of the state of Israel.
Good. Rabbi Pruzansky, two questions I had for you. Number one was, how was your last few days at shul in Teaneck? How was that for you?
The last few months obviously were very peculiar because the shul shut down in March. And we spent March, April, May, really from right after Purim through Shavuot, essentially not in the building, not having minyanim at all. So a lot of plans that I had were thwarted. I insisted on reopening first outdoor minyanim after Shavuot that I thought were safe. And then a month later, we went back into shul with reduced numbers because of the need for social distancing. So in fact, I was able to leave the shul open, but it wasn't the same. One of the fears I have that it's still prevalent is that Jews will be somewhat reluctant to return to shul in the future. Here it's an issue also because they're starting to enjoy the smaller minyanim of just their friends, and they don't necessarily want to be part of a large structure organization. They'll remain nominally part of it, but it's not easy to walk across the street to someone's backyard than walk a block or two at 10 to daven in shul and have to deal with so many other people. So,
but I'm asking you about your personal emotional state. Okay, I understand those issues, but how was it for you?
Yeah, so I'm of Lithuanian origin. I don't reflect a lot on my emotions. I have to say it was very hard. It was hard. I tried to live in the moment. It was hard. The shul was wonderful. They had all these grandiose plans.
26 years you were there.
26 years, a dinner, a farewell, etc. And it had to be cut back, but I think it was cut back in a way that resulted in the best possible departure I could have hoped for. My wife and I never really into the dinner, etc., but they had, something became very popular in America, is drive-by farewells. So it was a long ongoing farewell. It was a car parade that lasted a few hours, and they really went above and beyond in their goodbye. And the truth is, all right, you want me to bare my soul for the first time in many years? So Aliyah and Teshuva, maybe it's a good time for it. It's hard leaving so many people that you love, that you like, that you admire, and you respect, and you realize how much a part of your life, meaning my life, they were. And really, from what I've heard, I'm in contact with many people still, how much a part of their lives I was. And I know many people are struggling with that. I think paradoxically, it's eased because of the coronavirus restrictions, because the shul is open, but again, it's not really that populated because of the social distancing requirements. So many people would not have seen me regardless because they wouldn't be coming back to shul. But this was a stroke of genius by one of my newer members that already during the lockdown that we had in America that lasted for months, I started offering WhatsApp chats every day, 5 to 6 minutes of Torah, my thoughts, etc. And now I've continued. So again, the irony is people see me much more now than they might have seen me back when I was the rabbi. Because during the day, you see 100 people, you're only at 1 minute in the morning and at night, 100, 120 people. They come to the shiur, it's another group. But now, by the hundreds, people are part of my WhatsApp group, and they get to hear Divrei Torah and at least see me every day. And they see me, I should add, in much more casual clothing than they were accustomed to seeing me in.
That's right. Very interesting. There's a lot in that. The reason I asked you that is because, I think there might be some typing noise on your side, which is coming through. If I could ask for that. I want to tell you.
I'll just try to move my location a little better.
Yeah.
Now,
I want to tell you something, Rabbi Pruzansky. The reason I asked you that is just because, to me, you're you, but you're also something of here's a leading Jewish person, a rabbi in America, leaving this Teaneck, kind of like saying goodbye to Lady Liberty, maybe waving goodbye to Lady Liberty, going the other way, which is kind of, if you think about it, it's the opposite of Ellis Island. Like, who's going to be leaving America? And there you are in this successful, I would say very successful Jewish community, and you're saying goodbye to it. It means a lot. It means a lot to them. And what you described also with all the technology, the WhatsApp and all that, I think that makes that's a very modern story, very modern
Right.
reality.
I should say, I think I feel a lot the way you do. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud of what America has to offer in its best sense. And there's no doubt, I think Israel would benefit from much of the American civic society, although now is not a good time to import anything from
Right.
the American political process. But nonetheless, it was hard. I'm very grateful for what I did in B'nai Yeshurun for the people there. I've said a number of times, I personally think it's the best rabbinical job in America. When people got over the initial shock, and I told them it was January 2019 that I'd be leaving in July 2020, 18 months before, when they got over the initial shock, they realized that at a certain point, you can't just continue speaking about Israel
Right.
and Aliyah, but you have to do it also. And I think in that sense, it wasn't at the top of my mind, but in that sense, I think it's good message to send, a good lesson, and perhaps even inspiration for people in America.
You're also a rabbi who talks a lot about history. You talk about legal issues and others, but you talk about history. And in this period, we've seen also the passing away of some historical figures. Rav Adin Steinsaltz just passed away. Maybe he's one of the people that helped restart the idea that the Talmud should be made more accessible to all. The Art Scroll folks, I would say, took a page from his work and began their amazing project of the Steinsaltz edition, the Schonstein edition. So, any thoughts about Rav Steinsaltz? We could do it quick.
He was a maverick. He was quite an interesting personality. I always say that the greatest rabbis of any generation are not cookie cutter. In fact, they're out of the box, and that's what makes them great. So he was part of that genre, like Rav Kook, like Rav Soloveitchik. They don't have typical educations. They don't have typical backgrounds. They're different, and Rav Steinsaltz was like that as well. And there's no doubt. I remember in the 70s when the Steinsaltz Talmud became popular, it entered my orbit. You see how people took to it because the translation was in a very readable, understandable Hebrew, and the iyunim he had at the bottom. So it became a very effective means to bring people into the world of Torah study. And you're correct. I think Art Scroll built on that to some extent.
Rabbi Norman Lamb from Yeshiva University was the president of Yeshiva University when I was there. He passed away recently. He helped build up this incredible institution, which I'm sure was in your orbit as well.
Right. Well, I'm actually not a graduate of Yeshiva College, nor a Musmach of Reeds. So
but you did go to Cardozo.
I went to. That's true. I went to MTA as well.
Oh.
Right. So I did go to some of the YU schools. I was in YU for a year also, but I was not there when he was there. So we had a few interactions over the years. He was a person of great warmth, of great humor. And you see, he was successful in the various rabbinical roles that he had in life as a pulpit rabbi, then as a president of Yeshiva University. So he's a historic figure. Certainly many of my colleagues knew him much better than I did and spoke very eloquently about what he meant to them and what he contributed to their lives. But yeah, he literally rescued Yeshiva University from bankruptcy and set it on the map as an elite institution in American life and American Jewish life for sure. So he has many, many zchuyot to his credit.
Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, did you know him at all from Yeshivat Maleh Adumim, my Rosh Yeshiva?
Yeah, I don't get out much. So actually, all three that you mentioned, I met them, but I could not say I had a real personal relationship with either of them. And he too had a very long, illustrious, varied, diverse career in the rabbinate. Again, as a pulpit rabbi in different communities, I think he was in South Carolina, then in Canada, then university life, a Jews college in London, then a Rosh Yeshiva here. So it's so interesting that there are different routes a person can take in the rabbinate. I think the only one I didn't mention was the chaplaincy. And he, again, successfully completed his tasks in all three of those varied rabbinic dimensions, and very successfully. And what he did in Israel, in Ma'ale Adumim, in the yeshiva there, also something that influences the society. And he also had the ability to think a little out of the box. And I think it's one thing that we should be appreciative of. All the three individuals you mentioned, the great Rabbanim, Kulam Zichronom Livracha, they tended to be a little more modern or moderate than some other rabbis. But people should know, and I think their lives prove it, the road of Torah is not monolithic, and the tapestry of Torah is not monochrome. Within the world of Torah, there's such diversity that people should be able to look up and say, with all honesty and integrity, I find my place in this facet of the Torah world more than maybe in that facet of the Torah world, some other facet. And as we evaluate the lives of these individuals and we see what they contributed, I think it adds tremendously to the great panoply of Jewish life.
All right, one more person, which is somebody that you did know very well, which is Helen Friedman of AFSI, Americans for a Safe Israel. She also passed away in the last few months. She fought cancer for a long time, but before her bout with cancer, I remember her coming to Hebron. She was a Hebron regular with a group always, fought against the disengagement in Gaza, was indefatigable in her fight for the whole land of Israel against forces, and was really one of the people who was able to marshal how should I say, a balance between a fight for the whole enchilada, but still be a Zionist without losing that kind of love for the state of Israel and for the people of the state of Israel, but always with that fight in her eyes and in her soul. And she gave back her soul to her maker just in the last few months. I wanted to ask you about Helen Friedman.
Yeah, interestingly, I had many, many more interactions with her than any of the Rabbanim that you mentioned. She was a tireless fighter for the people of Israel, for the land of Israel, really one of the great lay Jewish leaders of the last generation. She had a very clear way of thinking, a very clear way of expressing her thoughts. She was fearless. She didn't mind confronting opponents, whether at rallies or her media opponents. She did not mind taking on the Jewish establishment, which very often, and still today, just tends to go with the flow and whatever would seem to be most politically correct. She did not suffer any of that. She was willing to fight the tough fights and never to compromise, never to give in on the most cherished values. So it came to Hebron, Yudan Shomron. She was willing to confront presidents who were hostile to Israel for their hostility, and she was willing to confront presidents who were friendly to Israel, but occasionally, as we saw it, misstepped. And you don't find that a lot in Jewish life. Many people are afraid of not being invited to the next White House party or the next congressional luncheon. So they have to watch what they say. But I always tell people, it doesn't pay to go to a party or a luncheon if you can't have any influence over the people. They should know that you're not only there to be used as a prop, but you're there so you can bring about some change in Jewish life and advocate for Jewish interests. And she knew that to the core of her being.
That's a great way to end our discussion, and I myself will take that advice from you. Because you want to say things the right way out there, but at the same time, you want to push the agenda forward. Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, last question: what are you looking forward to when you get out of the Corona lockdown in the land of Israel?
I'm looking forward to getting out of the lockdown, first and foremost. It's an unusual period of time. You look forward to the Yom Tovim, and then they take on a little different flavor. But I said to someone, I had the privilege of davening Musaf both days Rosh Hashanah, and you close your eyes and you're transported anywhere in the world, and you feel a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then you open your eyes and you're in the land of Israel. And what could be better than that? All right, I'll find, I hope, some effective way to contribute to Klal Yisrael.
Amen. Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky is the Rabbi Emeritus of Congregation Bnei Yeshurun, who he was there for 26 years. He's a lawyer, an author, a lecturer. You can connect to Rabbi Pruzansky easily, and it'll be in your interest by checking out Rabbi Pruzansky, Rabbi, and then PRUZANSKY.com. He's got podcasts out there. He's got writings. I'm a big fan of his history lessons as well. We played, in fact, one of your lessons about Rav Kahana, which I thought was incredible. And we want to thank you. And
too. I read 4 books that people can try to obtain also,
including they're called. I have a prophet for today, contemporary lessons,
judge for a time, and a whole commentary on the Chumash, the Jewish ethic of personal responsibility.
Well, keep it up, Rabbi Pruzansky. Thank you so much for joining us today, and Chag Sameach. And
my pleasure. Gemar Chatima Tova, Chag Sameach, and Kol Tov.
Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, folks, really fun to have him with us, and thank you everybody for joining me today on the program. I see Lou Weiss. He says Shana Tova to both of you, and Susan says in Hebrew, she says Gemar Chatima Tova, Shana Tova. It's so fun to have all of you from all around the world. And Mary, who is, Marjorie asks, so will you be rebuilding the Temple of Solomon? Marjorie, the answer to that is a resounding yes. We're working on that, and we're pulling no punches. That's the direction we're heading in. I want to thank all of you for being with me. Write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. Check out my webpage, yishaifleisher.com, for articles, podcasts, videos, and all the stuff that we're doing. Of course, you could support if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, a virtual cup of coffee. It's easy. Just go to yishaifleisher.com/donate. It's just that easy. And most importantly is that Yom Kippur is coming. Shabbat Shuvah is coming. The biggest thing you could do is to connect to the God of Israel, who is calling all of us for repentance and for a stronger connection. And I bless you all for also health in this tricky period. May we grow through it. God is inviting us to get closer to him. Shalom, everybody, and we'll be in touch. More great stuff is on the way. Peace. Peace in the Middle East, and shalom in the home.